The rain stung my face like needles. But I didn't move. I stood on the edge of the cliff. The Pacific roaring below. My heart pounding louder than the waves. I wasn't supposed to feel this way, not for him. Not for the alpha who'd hired me to carry his child, and nothing more. My name is Eli Carter. An Omega living in a world where biology is destiny. In the coastal town of Astoria, Oregon, where the air smells of salt and regret, Omegas like me scrape by, our lives dictated by alphas who hold all the power. I was 24, broke, and desperate when I signed the contract with Julian Voss, the coldest alpha I'd ever met, a biotech tycoon whose icy blue eyes could freeze a room. The deal was simple. I'd be his surrogate, bear his heir, and walk away with enough money to start over. No strings, no feelings, just a transaction. So why? 3 months into this pregnancy, was he looking at me like I was his entire world? It started with the little things. Julian's penthouse in Portland was all glass and steel, a fortress of control. But he'd linger when he handed me my prenatal vitamins, his fingers brushing mine. He'd ask about my day, his voice low and deliberate, like he was memorizing every word I said. I told myself it was nothing. Alphas don't fall for Omegas like me, not the ones society deems disposable. But every time his gaze softened, my heart betrayed me, whispering that maybe, just maybe, I was more than a means to an end. I grew up in foster homes, bounced from one to another after my parents died in a car crash when I was 6. Omegas don't get adopted easily. We're too much trouble, too much risk. By the time I aged out, I'd learned to keep my walls up, to trust no one. Astoria was my fresh start, a place to blend into the fog and forget my past. But the bills piled up, and when I saw Julian's ad for a surrogate, it felt like fate or a trap. The first time we met, in his sleek office overlooking the Willamette River, I almost walked out. He was all sharp-edged stall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline that could cut glass and a presence that screamed power. "You'll do," he'd said, barely looking up from his tablet, like I was just another business deal. I signed the contract with shaking hands, promising myself I'd stay detached. But detachment was impossible when Julian started showing up at my appointments, driving me to the clinic himself instead of sending his assistant. He'd sit in the waiting room, his tailored suit out of place among the chipped paint and flickering fluorescent lights, scrolling through his phone but glancing at me every few seconds. Once, when I winced during an ultrasound, his hand shot out, gripping mine before he caught himself and pulled back. "You're doing well," he'd muttered, his voice rough, like he wasn't used to kindness. I didn't know what to make of it. Alphas like Julian, rich, dominant, untouchable, didn't care about Omegas like me. In our world, Omegas were tools, valued only for what we could provide: heirs, labor, or fleeting pleasure. Yet Julian started cooking for me, claiming it was to ensure the baby's health. He'd bring me meals: grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, things I'd never tasted growing up on instant noodles. One night, he caught me staring at the spread on his dining table, and I blurted, "Why are you doing this?" He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Doing what?" "This." I gestured at the food, the apartment, the way he looked at me. "I'm just the surrogate." "You don't have to. You're carrying my child." He cut me off, his voice sharp but his eyes soft. "That makes you important." Important. The word hit me like a tidal wave. No one had ever called me that. Not the foster parents who saw me as a paycheck. Not the bosses who fired me for being too omega. I wanted to believe him, but I knew better. Alphas don't change, and men like Julian don't fall for broken things like me. Still, the cracks in his cold facade grew. He started asking about my life, me favorite books, my dreams, things no one had cared about since I was a kid. One night, after a long day at the clinic, he found me on the balcony, staring at the city lights. I was shivering, and he draped his coat over my shoulders without a word. The scent of him cedar and something sharp, like winter air, clung to the fabric, and I hated how much I wanted to lean into it. "You don't have to pretend you care," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat of him. "I'm not pretending, Eli." My breath caught. His hand hovered near my cheek, like he wanted to touch me but didn't trust himself. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me. For a moment, I wanted him to. But then his phone rang, shattering the silence, and he stepped back, his face shutting down like a vault. "I have to take this," he said, already turning away. I stood there, his coat still warm around me, feeling like I'd been offered something precious and then had it ripped away. I was just the surrogate. That's all I was supposed to be. So why did my heart ache like I'd lost something I never had? The next day, Julian was back to his usual self-distant, professional, all business. But I couldn't shake the memory of his voice, the way he'd said my name like it mattered. I started noticing other things, the way he'd watch me when he thought I wasn't looking, the way his jaw clenched when his business partners mentioned the omega like I was a line item in a budget. One afternoon, while I was resting on his couch, he got a call from his mother, a sharp-voiced woman who'd made it clear she disapproved of me from the start. I overheard her through the speaker, her words slicing through the air. "You're spending too much time with that omega, Julian. He's a means to an end, nothing more. You have a legacy to uphold." I waited for Julian to agree, to dismiss me like everyone else had. But he didn't. "Eli is not a means to an end," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "He's more than that." I froze, my heart pounding. He hung up before I could process what I'd heard. When he turned and saw me watching, his expression softened, but he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. That moment, that single sentence, changed everything. I wasn't just the surrogate anymore. I was something else, something I didn't dare name. And as the weeks passed, with the baby growing inside me and Julian's walls crumbling, I started to wonder, could an omega like me, scarred and scared, ever be enough for an alpha like him? The weeks blurred into a haze of soft touches and unspoken promises. Julian's penthouse, once a sterile cage, started feeling like a sanctuary, a place where I could breathe, even if I didn't trust the air. But every moment of warmth between us was shadowed by the truth. I was still just the surrogate, and this baby wasn't mine to keep. One evening, as rain battered the floor-to-ceiling windows, Julian sat across from me at his dining table. His tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. He looked human, not like the untouchable alpha who'd hired me. "Tell me something real," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Something no one else knows." I hesitated, my fingers tracing the rim of my glass. No one had ever asked me that. I'd spent my life hiding, protecting the fragile parts of myself from a world that didn't care. But Julian's eyes, steady and searching, pulled the truth from me. I used to dream of being a writer. I admitted. When I was a kid, I'd hide under the covers with a flashlight, scribbling stories about people who got to be free. He leaned forward, his gaze never leaving mine. Why'd you stop? I laughed, bitter and small. Life doesn't care about Omega dreams. Survival comes first. He didn't respond right away, but his hand reached across the table, covering mine. His touch was warm, grounding, and for a moment, I let myself believe I could be more than a contract. But then reality crashed in a sharp pain in my abdomen, sudden and fierce. I gasped, clutching my stomach, and Julian was at my side in an instant, his arms steadying me. Eli, what's wrong? His voice was tight with panic, a crack in his unshakable facade. I don't know. I managed, fear clawing at my throat. The baby. He didn't hesitate. He scooped me up, his strength effortless, and within minutes, we were speeding toward the hospital. The city lights blurred outside the car window, mirroring the chaos in my mind. What if I lost the baby? What if I lost the only thing tying me to Julian? At the hospital, the doctors ran tests, their faces unreadable. Julian never left my side, his hand gripping mine like a lifeline. When the doctor finally returned, her words were a relief and a warning. The baby's fine, but you're under too much stress. Eli, you need to rest, or you risk complications. Julian's jaw tightened, and I saw guilt flash in his eyes. This is my fault, he muttered as we left the hospital, his voice barely audible over the rain. No, it's not, I said, but he shook his head, his expression dark. I've been pushing you too hard, letting myself get too close. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I thought I could keep this professional, but I can't. Not with you. My heart stopped. What are you saying? He turned to me, his eyes raw with something I'd never seen in him before: vulnerability. I'm saying I feel something for you, Eli. Something I wasn't supposed to feel. And it scares the hell out of me. The confession hung between us, heavy and fragile. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him I felt it too. But fear held me back. What did it mean for an alpha like Julian to care for an omega like me? Could it ever be real? Or was I just a fleeting obsession? The next day, Julian insisted I move into his penthouse full-time. For the baby's sake, he said. But the way he watched me unpack my meager belongings told a different story. He was protective, almost possessive. But there was a tenderness in his actions that made my chest ache. He'd bring me tea in the mornings, sit with me on the balcony at night. And once, when he thought I was asleep, he brushed a strand of hair from my face and whispered, "You deserve so much more than this." But the world outside his penthouse wasn't kind. His mother's calls grew more frequent, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're risking everything, Julian," I overheard her say one night. "An omega? Really? You need an heir, not a scandal." I waited for him to defend me again. But this time, he didn't. He just hung up, his silence cutting deeper than her words. Doubt crept in, cold and insidious. Was I fooling myself, thinking I could be more than a surrogate? Then came the gala. Julian's company was hosting a fundraiser, and he insisted I attend, claiming it was to show the world I was under his protection. I felt out of place in the borrowed suit, surrounded by alphas and betas who looked through me like I was invisible. But Julian never left my side, his hand resting lightly on my back, a silent claim that made my heart race. Halfway through the night, a man approached a stall, polished, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Julian, you've been hiding this one," he said, nodding at me. "Didn't know you were into charity cases." Julian's grip on my waist tightened, his voice lethal. "Speak about him like that again, and you'll regret it." The man laughed, unfazed, but the tension in Julian's body was electric. Later, as we stood on the balcony overlooking the city, he turned to me, his eyes fierce. "No one gets to talk about you like that." No one. I wanted to believe him, to lose myself in the heat of his words. But the doubt lingered. "Julian, what are we doing?" You're not just anything," he snapped, stepping closer. "You're Eli. You're the one who makes this feel like home." Before I could respond, he kissed me. It was desperate, hungry, like he'd been holding back for months. I melted into him, the world fading until it was just us, the city lights, and the pounding of my heart. But when we pulled apart, reality crashed back. His mother's words, the gala's whispers, the contract I'd signed, they all reminded me this wasn't my life to keep. "I can't do this," I whispered, stepping back. "I can't pretend this is real when it's not." Julian's face crumpled, but before he could respond, his phone rang again. He ignored it, reaching for me, but I turned away, my heart breaking. I was falling for him, and it was going to destroy me. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk between hope and heartbreak. I stayed in Julian's penthouse, but I kept my distance, building walls to protect what was left of my heart. He tried to reach me small gestures, like leaving my favorite tea on the counter or sitting silently with me during doctor's appointments, but I couldn't let myself fall again. Not when I knew the truth. This baby would be born. I'd walk away, and Julian would move on. But Julian didn't make it easy. One night, as I sat on the couch reading, he knelt in front of me, his hands resting lightly on my knees. "Eli, talk to me," he pleaded. "I can't keep pretending you're just the surrogate. You're not. You never were." I wanted to believe him, but the weight of his world, his family, his legacy, his mother's venom felt suffocating. "You don't get it, Julian," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm an Omega. I don't get to have this. I don't get to have you." He cupped my face, his thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "You have me," he said fiercely. "You've had me since the moment you walked into my office." I shook my head, pulling away. "Your mother will never let this happen. Your world won't." "Then I'll burn it all down," he said, his voice low and resolute. "I don't care about the legacy if it means losing you." His words broke something in me, and before I could stop myself, I kissed him. It was softer this time, full of promises neither of us knew how to keep. But for that moment, I let myself believe in him and us. The next day, everything fell apart. His mother showed up at the penthouse, her presence like a storm cloud. She didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge the swell of my belly. "Julian, this ends now," she said, her voice cold as steel. "I've arranged a match for you. A beta from a good family. You'll marry her after the child is born." I froze, my heart in my throat. Julian's face darkened, but before he could speak, I slipped out of the room, my chest tight. I didn't belong here. I never had. That night, I packed a bag. I couldn't stay. Couldn't watch Julian choose between me and his world. But as I reached for the door, he caught my wrist, his eyes wild with desperation. Don't do this. Eli. Don't leave me. I have to. I choked out. I'm not your home. Julian. I'm just the Omega who got too close. He pulled me into his arms, his voice breaking. You're my home. You and the Baburi everything. I wanted to stay, to believe him, but fear won. I left, the door clicking shut behind me, and I didn't look back. The next few weeks were a blur of cheap motels and sleepless nights. I stayed in Astoria, hiding from the world, my heart aching for Julian, but my mind telling me I'd done the right thing. The baby kicked, a reminder of the life I was carrying, and I clung to that, telling myself it was enough. But Julian didn't give up. He found me. Of course, Say always would. He showed up at the diner where I'd taken a job, his suit rumpled, his eyes haunted. I told her no, he said, his voice raw. I told my mother I'm done with her plans, her legacy. I choose you, Eli. I'll always choose you. I stared at him, my walls crumbling. Why? I whispered. Why me? Because you make me feel alive, he said, stepping closer. Because you're brave and kind and stronger than anyone I've ever known. Because I love you. The words hit me like a wave, washing away the doubt, the fear, the years of being told I was nothing. I didn't realize I was crying until he pulled me into his arms, his lips brushing my forehead. Come home, he whispered. And I did. Not to the penthouse, but to him. The baby was born on a stormy night, a healthy boy with Julian's blue eyes. We named him Noah, a symbol of new beginnings. Julian cut ties with his mother, sold his stake in the company, and we moved to a small house by the coast, where the waves sang us to sleep. Society whispered, but we didn't care. We had each other, and that was enough. Years later, as I watched Julian teach Noah how to skip stones on the beach, I realized something. I wasn't just the surrogate Omega anymore. I was Eli, loved and chosen, the heart of a home I'd never dreamed I could have. And Julian, the cold alpha who'd once been my employer, was now my partner, my love, my everything. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was our testament to the power of love to rewrite destiny, to turn a contract into a vow, and to make an Omega like me feel like the only home that mattered.